gonna hate leaving.
All right. Well, look, Betty, I hope you enjoyed your trip here and the reunion, and thanks very much for talking to us and sharing your
I had
thoughts.
a wonderful time, and it's just marvellous. I couldn't be at anything better.
Okay, thanks.
I'm so happy to be here.
All right, Betty,
Yes,
thanks very much.
Bye.
Thank you. Back for the reunion at Glostermin. Nolan, you're enjoying yourself so far?
Very much so, yes. It was tremendous, yeah.
Were you here yesterday? You were?
Yes, indeed. Well, I live locally anyway, so just but most of my family were back. There were 7 of us, and 6 of us were here.
Very good. Did I 60?
We lived in Laura, which was near to. We used to cross the fields into Glostermin and onto Glostermin School then. So it was most enjoyable, yeah.
How many the years that you were in the school? From what year to what year?
I think I was looking at the register last night. I think I started in 51, but I'd have to look at it together. It's done.
You're only saying that now for us.
No.
Not letting on.
Oh, I'm not 21 anymore. So there weren't that many in our class, I suppose. It was a small enough class. But then I would see a lot of people here, but still there were people, that I wouldn't have seen for a long period of time. But I was admired all the work, the tremendous work the committee put into it now.
Yes.
Yeah, I had no input really, even though I was a past pupil and local. But
I'm sure, like a lot of people here, you got a lot out of this weekend.
Terrific, and everybody thoroughly enjoyed it yesterday, and meal and everything, and it was extremely friendly. And you can see now that people are still chatting and catching up.
Yes.
On the fun and what we did and what we didn't do,
There's a lot of people here from abroad and from areas around the country. Is there many people here that you've met that you haven't possibly met since the day you left school?
Very much so. Kate Fanning. Now, she lived right nearly opposite the school, and her father died very suddenly when she was young, and her mother had been dead. And we hadn't seen her for years, so it was very... my older sister and herself would be, I suppose, more or less the same age. So it was lovely seeing her. We were hoping that she would come, because she used to keep in contact over the years, And she's here with her son and her daughter-in-law, so it was lovely seeing her, And first, a cousin of my mother's, who I haven't seen for years either, a nun. She's mourn, so she's also here. So we were surprised, So it was nice. It was very
She was telling me she was just there for 1 year or something. She stayed with an uncle. Would that be the same?
Yes, that's the same people. He lived behind the school. He features in the book now. He's called Mick Woods, and it's a fairly several families around of that name. But so Mick was one of them. Mick and.
Were you out at the old school at all over the last?
I went up last night, and obviously inside it's not recognisable as the old school, but he's done a beautiful job on it. And we were up looking at the old toilets, the dry toilets, and we really had a great laugh to think that we were saying nobody was actually died as a result of using them. We didn't know anything about E. coli or anything like that. But I suppose they were happy days, really. Yeah. Mrs. Rain now, I have no recollection of getting thumped or anything like that. You had to be very difficult now before you got slapped, I mean. So, and she had to handle everybody, in one school.
Yeah, I just noticed. Was a notice, as an outsider, the amount of people, such a huge respect for the lady. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
She commands a huge respect among people.
She was taken down yesterday. She's not very well at all. So her family had her down yesterday. So and I say when I went, the boys that time in 6th and 7th class must have been 15 and 16 years of age, and some of them, would be as tall then as they would have been as adults. There were 5 or 6 feet. They looked huge to us. So it was no easy job.
She's a great woman.
The tiny little ones to the really big ones, So
Anna Maria Cole from O'Reilly.
And Anna Maria, obviously it's a long time since you attended school at Roscoe. What can you remember the years?
I started school in 1919 and I finished in 1933.
1918?
1919.
1919?
Yes, 19.
1919, yeah. Right. And somebody was telling me earlier that your father had a hand in the building of the school. Is that true?
He worked as a labourer at it.
Right. There were tough times drawing stone.
There were very tough times drawing stone and all the rest of it. But they were great workers and they got the school going anyway.
Yes. And you were saying there you were involved, you were in school from 1919 to 30. Can you remember any of the teachers that taught you in that time?
Mrs. Murphy at Glostermin, she was teaching all that time. And then Miss Masterton came in later years. Now in my last years in the school, Miss Masterton was there. And there was Miss O'Rourke was there too. She was from Banlamore, and but she was the junior classes. I was in the senior classes at that time when she came.
Right. And did you have a look at could you look at the roll books or any of the old names that you remember back the times that you were there?
Well, there was Bridget O'Neill and Kathleen Conboy and Alice Conboy. I'm not in very good health, but I'm not too bad.
Well, they say, that you can't judge a book by the cover, but you're looking well, I know it.
Well, that's right.
Well, look, I hope you had a nice time here and a nice time meeting your old friends and people that you met.
It was lovely.
Yeah, and you enjoyed it.
I enjoyed it.
And you'll be back for the next one. Thanks, Annie. Emma's. Sean, you attended the school from what years?
1955 to 1965.
Good years.
Good years, good memories of it, yeah.
You met a few. Obviously, you met a few people that you hadn't met in a long number of years. That people that emigrated, and that was there many of them over these last 2 days?
I met quite a few, yeah. Some of the neighbours, Murphy's and Laura, that haven't seen in a long time, you know. And
you got to see Mrs. Rinn, of course, your teacher.
Mrs. Rinn yesterday evening, yeah.
Yeah.
Good to see her. So.
Yeah.
Thanks
So, I suppose thinking back at one teacher school, it mustn't have been easy for both teacher and pupil.
I suppose it wasn't, no. But we got a good education, and Mrs. Rinn was a great teacher. She was able to
She was a tough woman. I mean, it was very hard to teach. What would it have been? I suppose 6 or 7, maybe 8 different classes.
There was about 6 different classes. There was about 20 going to it, 21 when I was going around that. It was myself and Jerome and Angela in one class, and 4 or 5 in every other class around that. Right, thanks. Right.
Again, back at the reunion. Manus, I was told to mention to you about the culls. Is there something in that?
There is something in that indeed. The Culls of Arroddy lived across the corner of the lake from our place. I remember the Culls quite well, very, very, very well. Mike Joe in particular. He was a great man for cattle and always had stocks of cattle for the Monaghan Day and the big fairs in Mohill. The sisters, Annie and Mary, I remember, but not quite so well. His father, I remember very well, because he was a great man for mowing on the side, cutting rushes by sides. Going back, I can't actually remember what the years were, but that would have been probably the middle 50s, I guess. I don't remember when he died, but he was an established figure in the community. He worked wet and dry, and there won't be many people who remember the old Juana bag that the fertilizer came from somewhere way out around Peru. The 10-stone bags, and they were made of hemp, and he used to poke a hole in one of them, make a pixie cap of it and drape it over his shoulder, and he weeded spuds and mowed rushes, wet or dry, with his with his Juana bag on his head. So they were one of the many families in Arroddy, the Culls, the Donnellys, the Roddys, the Earleys, the Parrins, all along that lake shore. I mean, it was it was a community on its own in those days, really. And you could Sunday morning, you could tell who was going to first mass, who went to second mass. The Culls, by the way, I think...
Wouldn't go to any mass, maybe.
No.
They all went.
You did not go to a mass in those days, whether you believed they were going to mass or not. You went to mass. That was it, regardless. I think they were one of the few families I remember having at least 2, if not 3 bikes. The 2 girls were obviously working, had bikes of their own, which was most unusual. And Mike Joe had a brand new bike of his own, which, again...
It's a bit like all the 00 LMs.
The 00s, the badge of a bike, the old Rudge and the Rally in those days. If you had a new Rally, you were in the cash.
You were in the 00 zone, huh?
You were in well, probably even more so then days. Yeah. But walking was the order of the day.
Tell me this, Manus, what years were you attend Glostermin School?
Glostermin School, I started, I left it in 53. I believe the record says I was born in 1941, so give me 3 years, 44, I believe, 44, 45. Because in those days you started school as soon as the mother and father could get shut of you, particularly if there was a bunch of you.
Yes.
And I'm the oldest of 7. So the quicker you could be got out of the house and give the mother a bit of peace, the better.
All right.
You were away.
I'm sure you didn't give your mother any peace. Did
Well,
you? Well, I should say. You didn't give her any hassle, I'm sure.
No, I doubt that somehow or another. I think she would, God have mercy on her, she died about 7 years ago. I think she would possibly say something different. So Molly was my next one. Noeline, but I disappeared to England in the early 1960s, so coming back to this part of the country is a visit. It's always, I learn something new every time I come back, because I meet people that I should know and don't know. Pair of bikes from this very chapel here. We done 11 o'clock mass, as it was in the second mass, cycled to Manor Hamilton, had a visit with Charlie, cycled back and ended up in the villa at a dance that night. And that was quite, well, that wasn't quite normal. I mean, I suppose it was a bit
a
out
round
of the
trip of
ordinary.
about 70 miles.
It's a round
At
trip.
least.
It's a single trip of 70 miles, I think, perhaps. How many miles is it to Manor Hamilton from here?
Well, it's
I don't know, to be quite
26
true to
from
him.
Shambo, so I suppose another 10 from here, would it be?
I can't, to be honest, I wouldn't have a clue.
Yeah, it's about 80 miles round
It's
trip.
around 80 miles round trip. Well, it was a fair old run on a pair of bikes in those days,
Yeah,
and that wasn't unusual.
Yeah.
But then we cycled everywhere.
yeah.
So the bike was the end all and the be all of everything. You had the bike, you were in the money.
So just tell me just about the weekend itself. You enjoyed it?
Absolutely brilliant, and I must congratulate everybody particularly the people who started this, because as somebody said, from little oaks or from little acorns, great oaks grow. I could never have imagined somebody getting that off the ground to such a brilliant conclusion. Absolutely brilliant. You could not. The weather and the organisation was so good. I'm totally surprised and amazed, and I'm so pleased to be part of the whole thing. I just lost for words on it, basically. And so many people that I met who I haven't seen. Sheila Gallagher, for instance, we last met 20 years ago in England at a big celebration of some sort in London. Not our celebration, we just happened to be there, part of nosy and I think it was some royal event or another. Would you believe it? An Irishman going to a royal event. But it was part of the thing and we were there. So I haven't seen Sheila for 20 years, and there are so many, there's people here, the Keegans, I only know half the Keegan family, because I had left before the younger crowd ever came about. I think I know 3 of the Keegans. Jimmy Joe Donnelly and myself went to school together. Frankie Murphy. The list is endless. I see those people quite regularly. Betty Murphy I didn't see until about 5 years ago, for 32 years I believe. She was in America, and our holidays crossed when we were at home. Patsy Murphy and Jenny Murphy I haven't seen, although they're quite local. Again, you just don't see
It
those
takes
people.
actually an event like this to get everybody together, doesn't it?
It's amazing, it's brilliant, and as I say, I couldn't really put into words my thanks and congratulations